Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the incredible and honestly pretty grueling reality of keeping human connection alive in one of the absolute most remote places on Earth. You know, we take communication for granted so often, but today's story, it's going to completely reframe how you think about sending a simple message. All right, let's dive right in.
Let's start by thinking about your typical morning. It is just so easy to send a text today with a quick tap on a screen, right? You can reach someone across the globe in literally a fraction of a second. But I want you to compare that seamless digital experience to places on Earth where the road quite literally crumbles into sand. Seriously, how do people stay connected when they live dozens of kilometers beyond the very last phone line?
Well, meet Ketaram. He is the sole postman of the Somarad branch post office. And get this. He treks 20 kilometers every single day through the absolutely sizzling sands of the Thar Desert. He operates just 2.5 kilometers short of the Indo-Pakistan border. He is, quite literally, the physical bridge between the people of this isolated Rajasthani village and their far-flung families. But to really understand Ketaram's journey and why it matters so much, we first need to look at the massive legacy he's carrying on his shoulders.
Section 1. The Value of Words.
You see, he isn't just an isolated worker out there in the dunes. He's actually part of a historic, enduring lineage of message carriers within India's postal system. This is a sprawling network that has evolved over 150 years. Its primary mission? It's always been to ensure that no matter how isolated you are connected. They managed to reach the most remote oases of humanity in some of India's most extreme environments.
Ketaram's official title is a Gramin Dak Sewak, or GDS. Basically, these are rural postal workers who serve remote outposts. And this is not some small niche program, folks. There are over 300,000 of these delivery agents out there. They make up more than 50% of India Post's entire workforce. They are the absolute backbone of communication, operating entirely in spaces where modern infrastructure simply hasn't reached yet.
Section 2. The Harshest Commute. Let's look at how this builds into the physical reality of his daily life. Imagine a commute where the sand is so soft that even bicycles can't ply. Ketaram's footprints start right where all the vehicles stop. He relies entirely on his mojri-clad feet, that's traditional desert footwear by the way, to deliver the mail. Think about these logistics for a second. This mail travels by train from Jodhpur, which is some 330 kilometers away, then gets transferred to buses, and then it's finally hefted directly onto Ketaram's shoulders for the final, brutal leg of the journey.
And he does this in conditions most of us literally cannot even fathom. Ketaram works relentlessly in heats up to 49.9 degrees Celsius. Now you might be wondering why that highly specific number. Well, because regulations state that hitting exactly 50 degrees triggers a mandatory state holiday. So at 49.9, when his body is screaming that the heat is unbearable, he just keeps walking. Sometimes he even has to wait until sundown just to survive the delivery route.
The parameters of his job are completely unforgiving. Transport? Strictly on foot. He wears a simple khaki turban and shirt covering 20 kilometers daily. But honestly, the most brutal regulation is his maximum load. He is required to carry up to 28 kilos of mail. Carrying almost 60 pounds over 20 kilometers in shifting sand is a physical burden so intensely heavy, it's actually left Ketaram with a permanently slumped left shoulder. The job has quite literally reshaped his body.
Section 3. The Walking Sandman.
Surviving this daily grind requires just immense stamina. Ketaram doesn't have any fancy, high-tech cooling gear. His only protection against those scorching summer winds and the violent, swirling sandstorms of the Thar Desert is that standard khaki uniform and his turban. He faces the full fury of the desert head-on, day in and day out.
This next quote paints such a vivid picture of his reality. Ketaram poetically explains it like this. Water is too precious to washing, so I can only wipe my body. When I finish, there is a sand dune at my feet every evening. The desert environment clings to him so fiercely that he literally becomes a walking sandman by the time he finishes his shift.
Section 4. Lifelines of the Desert.
So, you have to ask yourself, why push your body to the absolute limit just for a mailbag? Well, the answer is simple. Survival. The villagers rely heavily on the post office for money orders sent by relatives working in other areas. In these arid lands, those small sums of money, they are the literal difference between eating and starving.
This creates an absolute, unbreakable confidence in the postal system. In fact, a few years back, there was a proposal to scrap the GDS system and just hand the duties over to village record keepers. And you know what happened? It was immediately rejected by the community. They knew only their trusted postman could do the job. And because it's so vital, the system requires agents to have another means of livelihood to ensure stability, and it permits them to serve until they're 65.
And look, this job is a lifeline for Caterham too. He explains, a call or famine is a way of life here. We would starve without this job. Even in a good year, his farm produces just one single crop of bajra, which simply isn't enough to feed his family of 5. Becoming a Graman dak sewak gave him a much-needed, assured income.
But Ketharam is not just a delivery driver. He serves a massive, deeply human social function. Beyond just handing over envelopes, he acts as the voice and the pen for many folks in the village. When he arrives, he's expected to read the letters aloud to those who can't read themselves, and he patiently sits down to draft the replies for them. He is the essential communication bridge for the entire community.
Section 5. The weight of bad news. But acting as the community's reader leads to what has to be the most emotionally taxing part of his entire job. If an envelope arrives with its right corner intentionally torn off, it signifies a shub samachar. In this culture, that torn corner is the dreaded visual marker letting everyone know that the letter bears news of a death. Keratamam has to bear the heavy emotional burden of delivering this devastation, but he follows a very strict, deeply philosophical protocol. A shub samachar cannot be carried into the house, he explains. So rather than walking in, he actually stands outside the threshold of the home. He reads the tragic news aloud to the grieving family, often reading it twice just to ensure they fully understand. And then, right there in the sand, he tears the letter to bits. As he says, bad news must be destroyed, so that the physical artifact of the tragedy never actually crosses their threshold. Take a second and really think about that emotional weight, combined with a 60-pound bag and just absolutely crushing heat. Yet, despite all of this, after over a decade and a half of bearing words across this desolate geography, Ketharam isn't bitter. He proudly says his spine is strong, and he remains incredibly grateful to continue serving his community as a Graman dak sewak, even past the age of 60.
Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with today. As we reflect on Ketharam's solitary footsteps out there in those shifting sand dunes, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In an age of instant digital messaging, where it takes literally zero physical effort to just say hello, what lengths would you go to for true human connection? When the screens go dark and the paved roads end, what is the enduring value of keeping us all connected? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a whole new appreciation for the humble letter. I'll catch you on the next one.